Mr. Chaskalson, you are late and you cannot have an excuse. You know that we keep time. Can you explain yourself, please?
I cannot. I have no excuses. I apologize. It won't happen again.
It won't happen again. Thank you. Apology accepted. Mr. Mnisi, I assume that because I think you jumped, you were dealing with the columned document around page, I think 18. I'm not asking you to go back at this stage, but I assume at some stage you will go back there and take it from there. Or unless I missed something.
Chairperson, on the tabulator, there was a summary of the events, was a quick snapshot view of what I've been going through now.
Okay.
So I'm now.
I'm not stopping you. But I'm just saying, I assume that at some point you will go back there.
I'll go back to summarize what we just discussed.
Okay. Please continue.
Thank you, Chair. I'm now moving to paragraph 90, where I start setting out the sequence of events and proceedings which occurred on the separate PACs being the 4th, 18th, and 25th of September, respectively. So on page 22, sworn statement, paragraph 90, I start dealing with what happened and what transpired on the 4th of September, 2025. This report was presented by the BEC Chairperson, Mr. Victor Hopper, to the Bid Adjudication Committee at its meeting held on the 4th of September 2025, Chair. During the deliberations, the BEC raised a number of substantive concerns regarding the evaluation outcomes and the contents of the report. Key among these were the absence of a clear justification for not recommending the highest scoring bidder across the various regions, as well as inconsistencies which were observed in the allocation of bidders to regions, including instances where the lower ranked or more expensive bidder were recommended without explanation. The BAC further noted concerns relating to the pricing and commercial viability. BAC indicated that certain bidders may have quoted unrealistically low prices, potentially affecting their ability to deliver on the required service, and confirmed that at least one of the bidders had acknowledged their inability to perform at the quoted rates in writing. However, the BAC found that these considerations were not sufficiently documented or substantiated within the report that was presented to the BAC. Additional concerns, including the absence of a final probity report confirming that all identified risk compliance issues had been adequately addressed, Chair. The lack of clarity on unit pricing and fee structures, particularly the inclusion of as and when required, which was key for this tender, and insufficient detail on the methodology applied to allocating regions to bidders. The BAC also raised concerns and compliance issues regarding operational practices, specifically the potential use of service providers across multiple regions without explicit provision in the tender specifications and the absence of clarity on the legal implications of such arrangements. Considering the above, the BAC resolved to refer the report back to BEC for revision. The committee indicated that it was not satisfied that the report adequately addressed critical issues related to bidder selection, to pricing, to integrity, probity confirmation, compliance with specifications of the bid, and the transparency of allocation methodology. The BEC was requested to address these matters comprehensively prior to submission to resubmission. The resolution here under has been attached as Annexure GM15 in the second bundle. GM15, Chair, has been catered for on 343 on the second bundle. So what we see on GM15, Chair, is an actual Bid Adjudication Committee resolution, which outlines the recommendations which were brought on board by the BEC. It gives the clear explanation or guidance in terms of what transpired during the meeting and what were the concerns that were raised. We'll take note for argument's sake, Chair, on page 346. On 346 of this Annexure GM15, we summarized that it was agreed, therefore, that the report be referred back to BEC on the basis that BEC was not comfortable with the following. 1, the pricing per award leads to bulk pricing, and some of the pricing in the fee structures are as and when. BEC further notes that as and when is not standard pricing. The report does not provide an explanation as to why the highest scoring bidder has not been
Can
recommended.
you please explain the concept of as and when pricing?
So, Chairperson, it's the rate-based appointment, meaning there will not be illegal invasions every day. So if we do an appointment without clearly stipulating as and when, the bidders might take advantage of that and submit a monthly invoice, even when there was no work that has been done in terms of removal of illegal structures or invasion.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
The third aspect is that we as BAC were fully aware that this bid underweight property. However, the final property report was not provided to the BAC at this stage, confirming that all the concerns that were raised had been addressed. Concerns in terms of service provided used across all regions was a massive provision which wasn't catered for in the specifications. There was no clarity in terms of methodology used in terms of allocating regions to specific bidders. On the basis of that region, Chairperson, it was resolved that this tender be referred back by the acting chairperson of that day, as I was not in. I am the chairperson of BAC. If I'm not in, I am delegated to appoint an acting chairperson. On the Bid Adjudication Committee, we sat on the 4th of September. The governance and support officer, who is a senior manager, was acting as the chairperson of the day.
But you were part of the process. It's just that when the document was signed, you were not there on the day.
No, Chair, I was not present at the BAC that sat on the 4th of September. I had appointed an acting chairperson to preside over the meeting on my behalf.
Again, it's just to try and understand how it works. So where you were reading now, second bullet, for example, it says the report does not provide, this is the BEC report you're referring to, it does not provide any explanation
Yes.
as to why the highest scoring bidder has not been recommended. Now, isn't it the function of the BAC to make its own determination on the basis of the report that you have received? Because you've received a report, and then you have members of the BEC, as you explained, attending that meeting. You ask them questions and they respond and provide clarifications. If the report of the BEC, according to your determination as a BAC, there's the highest bidder who should have been recommended, is that not a determination that the BAC then makes instead of referring that back to the BAC? I'm just trying to understand how things work in practice, in fact.
In practice, Chair, had the BAC make a determination, there will be a breach in lines in terms of the delegation of authorities. 3 processes can be undertaken from a BAC. You can recommend for the award, you can cancel the bid if the irregularities or the issues picked up are uncurable in nature. 3, you can refer the matter back to the BAC for reconsideration. So in this instance, there was no certainty as to why. The report was not substantive in terms of why is this bidder, who appears to be the cheapest, not awarded. Yes, as the BEC, you give us a letter saying this particular bidder had confirmed, you tell the BEC that the bidder said they're unable to deliver. Their prices that they quoted, they will not be able to execute the work, but that's not attached in the BAC report, meaning when you do come back to BAC, we expect that letter authorized by that specific service provider who was the highest scoring bidder at this stage. So we don't make a directive because there will be a breach of process. We have to allow the BEC to make a determination. There must be consensus throughout the process. We make a determination, in some instance, it might not be well informed. So we need to ensure that the committee reevaluates this. They could come back to BAC and say, this bidder has not been awarded because of these reasons. We'll then have an opportunity to interact with the reasons that have been provided, either agree with them or disagree with them on the way forward. If this issue, for example, were to come up on the second round, Chair, and we're still uncertain, BAC could make a provision that we are now either uncertain whether we could proceed with this, irregularities that we are identifying are not cured, we would recommend for a cancellation of this bid. Or we have now received adequate explanation in terms of why this higher scoring bidder was not awarded, at which stage it might have fallen off the bandwagon, and then move ahead with the recommendation. So we'll not give a directive, we'll allow an opportunity for the committee to elaborate on this matter so that there's consensus throughout. We wouldn't want to force a decision down a committee, Chair. The delegation and segregation of authorities don't allow that at all.
Okay, thank you.
Chairperson, I will now move back to the sworn statement on page 24, I am proceeding to the second Bid Adjudication Committee, which sat on the 18th of September on page number 24. So on page 24, the BEC comes back. Again, Mr. Victor Hopper, who was the chairperson of the BAC, comes to BAC. During his deliberations, the BAC raised several concerns relating to the compliance, property, and transparency of the evaluation process. The committee emphasized that the requirement, once issues raised by the property team have been addressed by the BAC, a final property report must then be brought on board to give confirmation that indeed the identified concerns have been fully resolved. Chairperson, in this regard, the BAC noted that documentation provided on validity extensions reflected responses only from 5 bidders rather than all 57. There were no formal communication received from the probity audit team, the independent external probity audit team, that the matters that had been raised have been adequately resolved. On 97, I further stated the BEC resolved that the tender remained valid until the end. They responded that the tender remained valid until the end of September and that the recent extension was just a precautionary measure to ensure that the validity upon finalization. It further undertook to ensure submission of all outstanding bidder confirmations, which it did. 98, the Bid Evaluation Committee also highlighted the need for greater clarity and transparency in the report, particularly regarding the methodology used to allocate regions. This comes up again as an issue which is not clearly dealt with as from the first referral back. The BEC indicated that the bid specifications did not prescribe specific allocation criteria. However, other than limiting bidders to one region, the Bid Evaluation Committee then decided to utilize the preference point system, which will be applied in terms of determining allocation of bidders, meaning 7 regions, 7 bidders, higher scoring bidder from 1 to 7 will be allocated in that order. 1, region 1, 2, region 2. That was the preference point system that were to be outlined. However, Chair, what the PAC took note of is that this application system was not clearly articulated in the report. The report that they're bringing to BAC now, yes, they are responding to us and they're telling us in the BAC, but it's not clearly articulated on the process of utilizing the preference point system to allocate bidders to regions. Additional concerns, Chair, were raised regarding the rationale for engaging in price negotiations only with certain bidders and not all, as well as inconsistencies identified in the property findings. Specifically, the BAC noted a discrepancy where a bidder which was flagged by the property team for non-compliance was nonetheless recommended for award without adequate explanation. This was a major red flag from us, which indicated that there was an inconsistency on the property report and what the BEC was bringing to BAC. In paragraph 100, I summarize. In light of these concerns, the BAC resolved to refer the report back to BEC on the following directive. 1, provide clarity on the apparent inconsistency regarding the recommendation of a bidder previously disqualified by the external independent property team. Obtain and submit a final property confirming that all issues have been dealt with satisfactorily. Clearly document the methodology which will be applied to allocate regions to suppliers as per the preference point system that you are verbally telling us now. I'm then going to refer us to GM16 on the second bundle, which outlines the resolution that was taken by the Bid Adjudication Committee. Again, Chair, referring this report back in light of those discrepancies that were noted. GM16 has been captured on page 348. So you'll see now that there is improvement in comparison to GM15. Firstly, there's no blanket amount that is now given to each bidder. In the previous GM15, you would have said region 1, bidder 15, a holistic price of 250,000 for argument's sake. Now it's clearly articulated on what the pricing for personnel is, what the pricing for vehicles is, what the pricing for additional vehicles are, and it's on an as and when basis. I'll move further, Chair, in terms of that major difference in articulation on the improvements that were done by the BEC towards page number 353. Well, let's start at the bottom of 352, where during the discussions on the matter, the Bid Adjudication Committee meeting held on the 18th of September, the committee resolved the following. I've touched on this in my summary that after the findings provided by the property team, they had been addressed by the BEC. The property team must now provide a final report giving us assurance. You can't just tell us by word of mouth as BEC that property team have confirmed the report is now fine. You can approve. We needed portfolio of evidence to convince us as the BAC that indeed that certainty was obtained.